How do we solve a quadratic equation by factoring when the a value is not 1? Let's find out together. Hi, and welcome to Algebra Examples. I'm Dr. Finch. I have a PhD in mathematics and over 20 years of experience in math education. Let's get to our problem for today. We are going to solve this equation, 2x squared plus 9x minus 5 is equal to 0, by factoring the equation. The key here to notice is that our a value is not equal to 1. Let's actually write down, we're going to start off, our a is 2, our b is 9, and our c on this equation is negative 5. We are going to go through a process where we have 5 steps, well, technically 6, to figure out how to solve this, since we're not going to be able to factor it like we normally do. All right, let's start off with step 1. We are going to multiply a times c. Okay, if we do that, we get 2 times negative 5. So we have negative 10. That is the first step in our solution. Number 2, we are going to find two numbers. This is going to be similar to our factoring that we're used to, that multiply to negative 10, and we want them to add to 9. Right? And so if you look out here, we want that AC thing, the negative 10, and then add to 9. That's in the center like we are used to seeing. Okay, so when we do that, normally the way that I would suggest going about this is start with your multiplication. We want negative 10. So let's figure out how negative 10 factors. We can multiply 1 times 10 or 2 times 5. What combination of those two numbers will get us a 9? Well, 2 and 5, it doesn't matter if you're adding, subtracting, whatever, they're not going to get you to 9. So we have to use the 1 and the 10. Well, we want it to be a positive 9 when we add the two numbers and a negative 10 when we multiply. So we know one of our numbers has to be positive, one has to be negative, and we want our bigger number to be positive and our smaller number to be negative, so we get a positive 9 when we add them. Okay, so those are our two numbers that we're going to work with. Step 3, rewrite the equation. And I'm going to use an EQN to abbreviate equation. With our BX term spread out. I don't know how else you want to say that. So instead of writing, we're going to start off our old way of writing this. The equation that we started with was 2x squared plus 9x minus 5. And instead of that 9x in the middle, so we're going to take this 9x and we're going to replace it with minus x plus 10x. So we are going to take that and there we go, replace it with the things that we found out, right? So up here we have 9x is equal to negative x plus 10x. So we're going to substitute that in there. So we're going to make it into two chunks instead of one. Now, the reason why we want to break this up into two pieces is we are going to use each of these pieces to factor. So we're going to factor the first two terms and the last two terms. So the first two terms are the 2x squared minus x. The last two terms are the 10x minus 5. So this is going to give us, when we factor that, let's see, in the first one, we can pull out a copy of x. Notice that if we multiply this x back in, we'd get our first one would turn into 2x squared minus, and our second term, when we multiply that in, gets us a minus x. So we know we did that correctly. Plus, and we're going to factor our next one. Now, our next two terms, what do we have in common for both of these? It's not an x. This time you'll notice both terms have a 5 involved, so we can pull out a 5. Generally, this is what's going to happen is you are going to have an x come out of the first two terms and a number come out of the second two terms. And again, notice if we multiply this back in, right? If the 5 goes in here, this becomes 10x. 5 goes in here, we get a minus 5. The other thing that we should also be aware of is when this happens, we should have the other two terms, once we factor out, should be exactly the same. If they're not the same, go back and check your work. Something went off. All right, next step. We are going to factor out the expression in parentheses. And this part is a little bit strange because usually we're factoring out one term and not like a parenthesis thing. So everything in green, we're going to pull out to the side. Oh, let me do that actually in black so that we see that separate. Let's see, we have our 2x plus 1 is pulled out to the side. What is left in this first term when we pull this out, we're going to be left with a little x. So we put that there, plus, and in our second term, when we pull this out, kind of peel it off, we get a 5 left over. So we end up with x plus 5. And again, you can double check your work. If we multiply this back in, we're going to get the term that we have right up here. So now notice we've factored it very nicely. We've got two terms and they're multiplied together. So now we are going to set each factor equal to 0 and solve. And that is going to be our sixth and last step. So we started off with x plus 5 times 2x minus 1. This whole thing was equal to 0. I kind of dropped the is equal to 0 at one point. We'll put that back in. So now we'll take half of it and go over here and set that equal to 0. This is one of the wonderful things about algebra is if you multiply two things and you get 0, then one or the other of those things you started out with have to be 0 themselves. And I'm saying it's wonderful because there are math universes out there where that is not always the case. If you take a linear algebra class or you take a upper abstract algebra class, you'll find out there are universes where that doesn't work. All right, so this gives us our two solutions, x is equal to 5 and x is equal to 1/2. Quite frequently when you have a is not equal to 1, when you're factoring that equation, one of your solutions will have a fraction in it. All right, thank you for listening. If you have a question that you'd like to see answered, please share by sending me an email at purplefinchmath@gmail.com.